But we have to be very careful when we freeze because when we get a hurricane and we lose power, everything we froze is bye bye. Like you can
Yeah.
almost count on it, you know? It may or may not happen, but we've had years. We went really heavy one year and our entire harvest rotted. And then we were
Yeah.
back at ground zero. So that's why we kind of focus more on the canning and
Hmm.
some dehydration, but not a whole lot of dehydration. I'm not a big fan of dehydrated foods.
Um, so I didn't dehydrate anything last year. I did water bath can and I froze things and I dried a couple of things just like, just air dry. And of course I cured things like my sweet potatoes, my white potatoes, my onions, and my garlic, which I consider, it's a level of preservation. Um, I I think when you opened up and you said it took an hour and a half to do the freezing, I think that's the part that I miss, right? Like being realistic with the time it's going to take. So in my mind, if that were me, I would be making a note, an actual note to say, all right, you need 90 to, 2 hours, 90 minutes to 2 hours to do this, like carving that out. That's when I get really rigid kind of in my timing. And honestly, that's when I have the best success, although I continue to fight kind of that level of organization. So knowing that, right, when I
Yeah.
look, and that makes sense to me when I look at the amount that you had, the idea of cleaning it, the idea of blanching it, which some people argue you don't need to do. It probably depends on how long you keep it frozen, yada yada yada. And then bagging it up and freezing it. Like I get it. And in my mind, it's never gonna take 90 minutes. Like
Yeah.
like it's like oh I'll get to it, and you look up and it's like oh shoot. Um,
Well, let me say this. First of all, I didn't clean any of it. I just pulled it in, cut it, and then I let the boiling water clean it.
oh okay
That's
okay.
how I looked at it. And then second
Hmm.
of all, I wasn't going to blanch it, but then I started looking at it and I was like, dude, if I blanch it, I can get it smaller and it'll
Hmm.
pack better.
Hmm.
So that's why I
Yeah.
blanched it. And we're gonna go into canning. I actually have kind of a rough idea. Um, but just to say this, and we'll break everything down for you in the coming months. But what I did is I blanched it for 2.5 minutes, and then I put it and I chilled it for 2.5 minutes in cold water.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
here's the kicker: once I started freezing it or doing the process, it was nonstop for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Nonstop. I mean, it was
Yeah.
in, out, freeze, drain, chop, in, out, freeze, drain, chop, in, out. It's constant. When I can, if it had, because again, we said 60 minutes, I would start it, and then here's my hack. I sit on the couch with a pair of binoculars and I go to look at the gauge. I'm like, all right, we're good. So I don't even get up unless I have to. But it's more stress for me because if that gauge drops below that 11 pounds of pressure,
Hmm.
you got to start the time over. And like,
Well,
I mean, that could go on and on and on. You know what I mean?
I've not timed all the entire process, but you also, I know you know this as well as anyone else. It's not just the cook time and the pressure canner. It's the getting it back down to zero. It's like it's all of that. Though that's hours you're spending, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
There's a hidden time frame to pressure canning that people don't tell you, or pressure
the
cooking for that matter.
yeah, getting something out of the water bath canner, although there is kind of the recommendation of, I think it's like 5 minutes. You turn the stove off and you wait 5 minutes and then you pull the jars out. Like you're done at that point. So again, I'm not, it all depends on the you. Again, I have a couple of soups that I make, whether it's Chipotle chicken, there's a beef version of it. There is a beef stew version, which is one of my favorite kind of old time meals. It's not as good as when you kind of make a roast with potatoes and carrots in it, but I'm not making roast with potatoes and carrots every week, every month even. So I basically accept that, which is another part of the conversation when it comes to the quality of the thing that you're preserving. So with the kale, you got to go into it with an idea of what you're going to use it for. That dictates how you're going to preserve it, right? So something like pressure canning just the kale greens itself, clearly you're going to use that in something that like the soup I was talking about.
Yeah.
something where it's going to be cooked down versus with you freezing it. If you want to, which I know you don't typically want to, you could put that into, some type of pasta dish where you have some fresh green, where you don't want, again, it cooked to pieces, but you're able to cook it to the point that you like it. Of course, you're not eating that fresh anymore because you had that heat on it. So, I mean, I think that for that particular vegetable, th- that you have a couple of different options for the tomatoes. I do want to share the 2 years I did preserve tomatoes. The large amount that I preserved, a large amount of that was from the seconds that I purchased from a farmer's market. It's like a bulk buy for them. It's not the most pristine tomato.
Right.
They sell it based on that at a discounted rate. I can get like a 25, 28 pound box. There's still some waiting because they're not completely ripe, which I didn't want them to be. So I'm waiting and monitoring them. And so there's still a bit of that, but I have all the same type of tomato. I'm able to do things in batches more so. And I haven't decided if I'm going to venture out into that this year because I still haven't gotten a handle on how many tomato products I really need. But the hint that I want to give, because I'm not suggesting y'all go out and do that, those first handfuls, unless you're doing like pico de gallo or some type of salsa, like those first handfuls of like your paste tomatoes, there is a recipe of the day. There is a slow roasted recipe that I follow where I core the tomato, cut it in half, core it, removing the inside, including the seeds, a little bit of olive oil. You can put whatever seasonings you want, like an Italian seasoning, some garlic, which by then I have garlic from the garden, and I think it's like 200 degrees. And you basically slow cook this. You're kind of drying the tomatoes out until it's your liking. It can be hours. I can't off the top of my head remember like the recommended time frame, but we're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. And this is the key. I freeze it, right? Throw it in. You can, throw it in a freezer bag because it has this oil on it. And so when you take it out, you can again dump it in pasta. I have eaten it more often than anything because the tomatoes from the grocery store, which I still buy, are so bad. But it has a different, obviously, taste. But I'll chop it up and put it into a salad, right? Again, different taste, different texture. Uh, so the first handfuls of tomatoes that I get that aren't really, important or large enough to do anything bigger with, that's what I've done with them last year. And I stumbled into it at the end of the year before last, and I love it. Best thing, and the only difficulty is keeping track of them in the freezer.
So two things. One, you just brought back the recipe of the day.
No, I didn't.
Yes,
I
I
just
knew
shared
it.
a
I knew you'd say
recipe.
that. You just
I
brought
did.
it
I
back.
saw your eyes twinkling.
You brought it back for subscriber episodes only.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that means that we have to do 6 a year each. That's not bad. It's a lot better than the 52 a year we were doing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
all
Okay, I can
support of
accept
it.
that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's your first recipe of the day, ladies and gentlemen. And then the other thing,
I forgot the flow of that. There you go.
I low key hate you for bringing it back, but it's
Mhm.
6. I can come up with 6 recipes.
Yeah, yeah.
But in
I'm
all,
already one down. Yeah.
yeah, you're one down and you didn't even know it. But in all seriousness, when it comes to you keep bringing up the seconds, and I love the idea of using seconds. Just for the
Mhm.
record, like I think it's great. But in the light of what we're doing here, how can we omit the need to buy seconds tomatoes to meet our needs? That's the question that we have here today.
I'm looking at my phone because if it's a proper recipe of the day, I do want to give the number of hours. So I'll here and there look for that. And if I get it before the end of the episode, I'll make sure to note it. Um, because it's at 200 degrees, it's cooking slow. But then once that thing starts to really kind of heat up, that oil can get a little bit darker on your tomatoes than you probably want. So
Is
keep
there
that
a
in
link
mind.
to the recipe?
No, I just,
You just
it's a
came up
mixture.
with it?
No, it's something I saw on someone doing on YouTube. That's why I'm looking for the screen capture.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but I I look at it and say I was tempted to do this And I've asked some farmers, like, the farmers market, like, how many tomatoes, not that they plant, how many Romas, you know, do they believe produce X pounds, right? So that is a guide. I say minimally, if you're talking about like pizza sauce and spaghetti sauce and, these kinds of things, salsa for a year, I'm thinking you probably need for a family of four, at least five tomato plants, paste tomato plants. I could be off there, but that's what I'm thinking. And a way that you can not buy seconds is this year dedicate more of your tomatoes to paste like tomatoes. I think they make for a general all-purpose tomato more better than any other tomato. I like my salsa with a few different types of like slicers, but that's me, my preference. Incorporating the slicers more so than I like salsa with Roma tomatoes
Right.
or a paste tomato. So I think that you have to make a sacrifice. Again, if you're talking about, which is at the top of the episode, a smaller garden, right? And, kind of how do you help and make bigger preservation goals and acquire those? Acquire those? You're not actually. You get one point.
Yeah.
My
No.
head's starting to get foggy.
Yeah. It's a sick brain. Everybody just hang with
Mhm.
us. I'll try and fill in the gaps here. Which, if y'all don't know, y'all are subscribers, so you've been with us for a while. Batavia's mind is tricky, so filling in the gaps is going to take all of my bandwidth. But
Don't start now.
yeah, so you said something there, and the title of this episode is now changed, but that's okay. The reason why we can our tomatoes in the way we do is because we've tried in the past to can like sauces and stuff like that. But what we found in that process is and this is a made up word, I'm sure, infinitesimally more tomatoes go into that
Mm-hmm.
sauce than if you do
Mm-hmm.
it like you just basically skin the tomatoes and do them whole. And then I've given the recipe before, but it's been so long. I reserve the right to redo recipes. So in the next episode, which will be my turn, I'll try and give you my recipe. But we've learned very easy recipes to use with that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's important because you go to make